My name is Noriki Shikata. I'm Deputy Cabinet Secretary for Public Relations at Prime Minister's Office. And to my right is Mr. Ichiro Nakayama, Councillor, Resources Enhancement Promotion Department of Fisheries Agency. And to his right is Mr. Takeshi Matsunaga, Assistant Press Secretary of Foreign Ministry. And to my left is Mr. Shinichi Kawarada, advisor to MEXT. And to his right, to his left is Mr. Masanori Shinano. He's a councillor of Secretariat of Nuclear Safety Commission. And lastly, from MHLW, Mr. Eiichi Yokota, Senior Technical Officer of Food Safety Department. At the outset, I'd like to just come up with a very brief overview of the situation after the great East Japan earthquakes. At this point of time, the number of the people who are dead, who are confirmed dead, is a little over 12,600. And the number of people who are missing is still over 15,000. At the same time, number of people who are rescued is over 26,000. And the number of confirmed displaced persons is a little over 162,000. Still, relief operations are continuing with over 100,000 self-defense forces people, nearly 3,000 police, over about 1,200 fire service, and the Maritime Safety Agency, Coast Guard, with over 50 vessels and about 20 aircraft. Let me just refer to today's Mr. Edano's Chief Cabinet Secretary's press conference. There was a question asked regarding the issue of discharging of radioactive water into the sea. And Mr. Edano mentioned that this has caused anxieties among fishermen and also the people in the neighboring countries. And what we are trying to do is to prevent highly contaminated or highly radioactive water from entering into the sea. We are trying to make use of various measures, including, for example, mega float. And we are collaborating very closely with TEPCO, between TEPCO and the Japanese government. And in order to make room for highly radioactive water, we made a choice that relatively lower radioactive water to be discharged into the sea. And we are making our utmost efforts to minimize any possible impacts. And we have been able to stop the water being emitted through the pit this time. But we are looking into other possible areas where there could be the emission of highly radioactive water into the sea. So this is something we are carrying out with our utmost efforts, and we are making our best efforts to control the situation, especially in terms of preventing highly radioactive water entering into the sea. I would like to stop here, and I would like to ask Mr. Matsunaga of Foreign Ministry to go next.
Thank you, Mr. Shikata. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. As always, I'd like to update about foreign assistance regarding the earthquake. Yesterday afternoon, relief supplies from the government of Canada arrived in Narita Airport. They are nuclear-related supplies, which consists of radiation survey meters and dosimeters. Immediately after the earthquake, the government of Canada expressed its readiness for cooperation. It provided 225,000 blankets, which have been distributed to those who had suffered from the disaster. We deeply appreciate the cooperation of the government of Canada to date. Yesterday, relief supplies arrived in the disaster response headquarters from a private school in Moscow State of the Russian Federation. The school is Moscow First Gymnasium, which was referred to by the Department of Russian President on the occasion of the signing of a book of condolences by Mrs. Svetlana Medvedeva, spouse of President of Russia. The relief supplies are blankets, clothes and others collected by the students of the school, as well as pictures drawn and messages written by the students of the school. These supplies had been conveyed to the Embassy of Japan in Russia and thereafter transported from Moscow to Niigata with the cooperation of the Japan Airlines and Nissin Corporation. They will be distributed to the disaster-affected evacuees in Niigata Prefecture through the Prefecture's Disaster Response Headquarters. I also would like to mention about donation, monetary donation. In response to the earthquake, the government of the Hellenic Republic informed that the government will provide relief money to the Japanese Red Cross Society. From Greece, letters of sympathy were sent from His Excellency Mr. Karolos Papoulias, President of the Hellenic Republic, His Excellency Mr. George Papandreou, Prime Minister, His Excellency Mr. Philippos Petrosalnik, President of the Hellenic Parliament, His Excellency Mr. Dimitris Dorotiasas, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and others. The government of Japan deeply appreciates a sense of solidarity expressed and assistance extended by the government of Hellenic Republic and the people of Greece. I also would like to refer to visit of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Argentina, His Excellency Mr. Héctor Timerman, Minister of Foreign Affairs, International Trade and Worship of the Argentine Republic, will visit Japan from Sunday, April 10th to Monday, April 11th. During his stay in Japan, Minister Timerman is scheduled to hold a meeting with Mr. Takeaki Matsumoto, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Japan. The visit takes place based on the wishes of Minister Timerman to express the condolences and solidarity to Japan upon the Great East Japan earthquake. Finally, I'd like to today I received a message from a senior official of the government in which attention was drawn to the fact that some foreign press reports suggested many Japanese were masks due to the fear of inhaling radioactive substance. Of course, the respectable press corps on the floor, who are very familiar with the sight at this time of a year of Japanese who wear masks due to hay fever, would not make such mistake. But I would like to mention about such a press report which might be misleading. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Matsunaga. Now I would like to ask next to go next, Mr. Kawarada up next.
Kawarada でございます。こんばんは。
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Kawarada from MEXT. So, as I have been reporting to you up to now, MEXT is responsible for the monitoring beyond the 20-kilometer radius from Fukushima nuclear power station. Land, sea, and aerial monitoring is carried out. And I have distributed materials compiled as of the 7th of April. I don't have anything special to highlight today. Thank you.
We are making use of simultaneous translation during initial remarks with channel 1 for English. Now, okay, then now I'd like to ask Mr. Shinano of Nuclear Safety Commission to go next.
それでは原子
Thank you. From the Nuclear Safety Commission, I would like to report to you the evaluation of the environmental radiation monitoring result, which is the assessment of the data that was collected between 10 on April 5th to 10 a.m. on April 6th. Overall, there was no data that was gathered that would immediately impose health risk. Starting with spatial radiation dose rate, there was some fluctuation in the readings. Going on to radioactivity in the air, compared to the data of the previous day, the readings had gone down. Turning to aviation monitoring, we didn't have additional gathering of data. So we are going to utilize the aviation monitoring as a tool to carry out the monitoring of the radiation level on the plane, not on each monitoring point. We didn't have any additional data for environmental sample, therefore, naturally, we don't have any additional assessment carried out. Going on to the environmental radioactivity level survey by prefecture, for the tap water, compared to the previous day, the level had gone up slightly. But this all had been below the index value for the restriction of the ingestion of food and beverages. That's all for tonight.
Hidehiko Nishiyama, Deputy Director General of NISA.
Thank you, Mr. Shikata. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to report the recent status of Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. First of all, regarding the reactor of Unit 1, we are injecting nitrogen to the containment vessel of the Unit 1. This is a precautionary measure to prevent hydrogen explosion, which may occur when the amount of vapor shrinks. Reactors of the units 2 and 3 are relatively stable, and we will inject nitrogen to those 2 units, 2 and 3, in the future. Regarding spent fuel pool, we threw pure water to the spent fuel pool of the Unit 3 through spent fuel pool cooling system and the spent fuel pool of the Unit 4 with concrete injecting machine. Regarding stagnant water, in the turbine building, we are transferring the water in the hot well to the condensate storage tank of the units 1 and 2 as a preparation to move the stagnant water to the hot well. Regarding the unit 3, since the hot well is full and full of water, and there may be some water flowing into the hot well, that hot well. So we are now waiting for our analysis, how we can deal with that. And the leaking of the highly radiated water spilling from the outside wall of the pit near the unit 2. As I reported yesterday, we are successfully stopped the leaking, and however, we are alerted that by the possibility that the water may appear, this kind of water may appear elsewhere, or the surface of the same kind of water in the trench attached to the unit 2 may rise. So we are closely monitoring those possibilities. As I reported for those 2 days, we are aiming at aiming at how can I say sorry. So this regarding this spilling water, we stopped, and we don't want to allow contaminated water spilled into the sea again. So so we took several measures, including placing rubber plate over the crack, and placing steel plate at the intake of the unit 2. Also, we continue to place sandbag at the broken part of the bank, which is a part of the peripherals of pond, kind of pond, in front of intakes of the units 1 through 4. In addition to that, we'll place a silt fence in front of the intake of the unit 2, and also at the place adjacent to sandbags at the entrance and at the entrance into the place in front of intakes of the units 1 through 4. Those actions means that we keep the kind of part of the sea which is in the rectangular shape, and before the intakes of those 4 units, we would like to keep water there, those contaminated water there, not to allow water to spill over to the outside. It will not be so perfect, but we will try not to allow proliferation of the contaminated water. Regarding the emergency release of slightly radiated water in the radioactive waste disposal system, I think we'll almost finish today. The amount of water is 8,000 tons, and it is slightly radiated. With respect to the emergency release of slightly radiated water in the subdrain pit, which originally came from underground, this release will finish by April 9th. Regarding the synthetic plastic which we sprayed to settle the radiated dust which fell the ground after the hydrogen explosions, at the unit 1, 3, and maybe 4, we are assessing the effectiveness of the plastic. So far, we think that we can use this plastic to settle down those dusts, radiated dust in the other places. Thank you very much. That's all for my report.
Thank you, Mr. Nishiyama. Then I'd like to ask Mr. Ichiro Nakayama. He's, again, Counselor, Resources Enhancement Promotion Department of Fisheries Agency.
はい、皆様、こんばんは。
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Nakayama of the Fisheries Agency. On the safety of the fishery product, I wish to give you the following presentation. We have prepared the number of materials. The first is the bioaccumulation or bioconcentration of radionuclides through food chain. So I hope you will refer to this page. We have the concentration factors, which is the ratio between the concentration in fish body and concentration in seawater. So we try to determine the degree of accumulation.
As you can see here, cesium, iodine, uranium, plutonium, hydrogen, DDT, PCB, the values are given. And cesium and iodine, which is currently measured, compared to, for example, DDT or other mercury, for example, it is at a very negligible level when it comes to the concentration factor. The value is very low. Now, the source of this information comes from the data that is compiled by the Fisheries Research Agency, and previously there was a study group meeting held at the Fisheries Agency. From 1978, for more than 30 years, every year, 59 types of fish as well as seashells and various marine products, 230 samples on an annual basis had been monitored every year for 30 years. And so that is the basis of this data. Now coming back to this page, DDT has a value of 12,000. That is a concentration factor. When it comes to cesium and iodine, it would be 5 to 100 or 10. So it would be in totally different orders of magnitude. Now, if you look at the graph to the right, through the food chain, how this would be increased is shown. So to the left, you see the value of the seawater and then the zooplankton. So from seawater to zooplankton, there would be a concentration increase of about 10 times an order of magnitude. And for DDT, and this is a logarithmic scale. So when you go up to mollusks, it's in the order of 100s, and going to fish, it would be in the order of tens of thousands. So the number of zeros would change. In case of cesium, the order of magnitude is quite constant. So through the food chain, concentration does not take place for cesium. Now going on to the next page. Iodine and cesium. This is something that I would like to elaborate. So iodine 131 has a half-life of 8 days. Cesium, this is solid, and if it is in the same marine product, it does not accumulate. And so it is said that it does not accumulate in the specific organ of these organisms. However, the mechanism within the organism is not fully elucidated. Cesium-137 has a half-life of 30 years, and cesium-134 about half-life of 2 years. So the periodic table you can see here, cesium is about the same, is on the same order as potassium, so it shows the same behavior as that of potassium. Now going on to the next page, how marine products would excrete the salt. So marine products drink a lot of seawater, and with that, cesium and chloride, potassium, sodium, magnesium, these are all taken in through the intake of seawater, but this is immediately excreted through the gills and urine. So, over a very short period of time, this is excreted ex vivo. Therefore, it does not accumulate in fish. And that is why the concentration factor is very low, like iodine being 10. So, the concentration factor of fish is really dependent on the intake of seawater. Moving on to the next page. This is cesium-137 and seawater's relationship. From 1990, the data is plotted, and as I have mentioned earlier, this data is accumulated over 30 years, and from 1990, radionuclide had gradually come down. So simultaneously with the reduction of the level in the seawater, a cesium level in the fish is coming down. So it is correlated. So the fish body and the seawater shows a correlation here. Now going on to the next page. So we have this data that was taken from the experiment, and cesium-137 is shown to the right. It has this biological half-life of about 50 days. Biological half-life means after it goes into the biological organism, it takes 50 days to be reduced to half the level. So after 50 days, the cesium that is taken in by organism would be excreted. Now, what about the natural half-life? So that is shown in the bar chart below. And I'm sorry, this is from 1985. And in 1986, the accident in Chernobyl took place, and so there was a spike here. But starting from the following year, 1987, Japanese sardine cesium-137 is shown here. And after the Chernobyl accident, this came down quite dramatically, which means that metabolism of cesium-137 is very rapid. So also, like in the experimental value, there in the natural condition, cesium-137 is excreted very quickly.
We have another sheet of paper which says FA, the Fishery Agencies, and this is frequently asked questions. But in the interest of time, I will not dwell into this. But I hope you would also refer to the following pages. This is by prefecture and by fishery cooperatives. The testing sample results, the fish as well as the seashells. This is the results of the crustacean as well as the marine products. So this is for your reference. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to ask Mr. Yokota of MHLW to go next.
Thank you. I wish to give you the test results of the food that had been submitted to MHLW yesterday. Altogether, 78 samples of 7 food had been reported to our ministry. And as you would see on the right, those that are shaded in gray are those samples that have surpassed the provisional value. So there were 26 samples that surpassed the standard levels. They are all produced, the vegetables produced in Fukushima. And as you know, there has been a restriction on shipment and also intake. So they do not exist in the market or distribution channel. We also have one sheet of paper, which is the sum of the past findings. We have altogether 1,049 samples tested. Of which 164 were above the level that required the action. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Yokota. Having finished initial remarks from officials, I'd like to now open the floor for questions. When you ask a question, please approach to the microphone and limit your question to only one. Okay.
はい、工作成岡ダウジョーンズ。This is a question to Mr. Nishiyama and Mr. Shinano, possibly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Chief Cabinet Secretary Edano is seeking some advice or recommendation from NISA and Japan Nuclear Safety Commission on the evacuation zones. And what is your view on this? What do you think the evacuation zone should look like?
ダウジョーンズの成岡ですけれども、西山さんと信濃さんにお尋ねいたします。私の理解が間違っていたら正してほしいんですけれども、枝野官房長官は避難地域に関して原子力安全委員会および原子力安全保安院の助言といいますか、勧告を求めているというふうに理解しておりますが、これに関してどのようなお考えでしょうか。そして避難地域というのは本来どういう形であるべきだとお考えでしょうか。
まず今、これまで原子力安全委員会が決められた指針に基づいて避難地域を設定してまいりました。それでそこには例えば50ミリシーベルトになったら避難をしていただくというようなことが基準になるわけですけれども、そういうことが時間がだいぶ長く経ってきておりますので、地震があって津波に襲われてから時間がだいぶ長く経ってきているので、その累積での放射能の浴びる量というのが積み上がってきております。でそういう時に50ミリシーベルトという基準との関係でどういうふうに考えたらいいのかということについて今考えるというのが一つの方向であります。それからもう一つは今避難している方が一時的にせよ自宅に戻って何か必要なものを取ってきたいというようなニーズにどういうふうにお答えできるのかということも考えなければいけないと思っております。これらについて考えをまとめた上で安全委員会ともよく相談して官房長官に関係のところに報告したいと思っております。
We have the evacuation zone has been determined up to now based on the guidelines that have been laid down by the Nuclear Safety Commission. And under those guidelines, for instance, a radiation level of 50 millisieverts would be the criteria for seeking evacuation. Considering, however, the fact that a considerable period of time has passed since the earthquake and the tsunami has occurred, the exposure to cumulative radiation may be building up. And therefore, one direction in which we are giving consideration is how we should look at the cumulative radiation in relation to the current criteria of 50 millisieverts. That's the first point. And the second point is we have to consider how we can respond to the needs of the residents in the evacuation area who wish to go back to their homes, although it may be temporarily, in order to bring back what they need for their daily life. So we intend to compile our consideration of these factors and also discuss this with the Nuclear Safety Commission to be reported to the Chief Cabinet Secretary and others concerned.
原子力安全委員会ですけれども、政府に対して技術的な助言を行うという原子力安全委員会の役割がありますけれども、その避難区域の見直しについて、政府にこれまで、助言を行ってはおりません。また助言を行うようにという指示もいただいておりません。ただ先ほど西山審議官からも説明がありましたとおり、避難期間がだいぶ長期にわたっていること、それから積算の線量が高くなっているエリアもありますので、いろいろな国際基準に照らしてですね、どういう基準が考えられるのかということについては一応検討をしております。
I am from the Nuclear Safety Commission. The Nuclear Safety Commission does have the role of providing technical advice to the government, but we have not, the government has not sought any advice regarding the review of the evacuation zone. We have not provided the government with any advice regarding the evacuation zone, and we have not received any instructions from the government to provide them with any advice regarding a review of the evacuation zone. However, as Mr. Nishiyama has explained earlier, since the period of the evacuation is becoming rather protracted, and also in view of the fact that there are areas where the cumulative exposure is expected to have become rather high, we are giving consideration to what kind of criteria may be possible when taking into account various international criteria that we have.
And Andy Pollack with the New York Times. I was wondering, the two gentlemen over there who talked about the environmental sampling, would it be possible to synthesize a little instead of just presenting a whole bunch of numbers, to sort of summarize or analyze a little? Are the radiation levels in the environment going down? And if so, could you give an example or two? Are they going up, or are they going down in some areas and up in some areas? Can you sort of describe the pattern so that readers might, have a better feel for what's happening?
ニューヨーク・タイムズのものですけれども、環境検体について、環境のサンプリングについて話をされたお二人の方に伺いたいんですけれども、もう少し合成といいますか、ただ数字を列挙するんではなくて、もう少し分析とかまとめた見解というのをいただくことはできないでしょうか。すなわち環境の放射能レベルは下がっているんでしょうか。要するに下がっているのであれば1に0を引いて下がっていることを示していただきたいし、上がっているのであればやはり1、2、0を引いて上がっていることを示していただきたいし、あるいはある地域においては下がっているけれども、ある地域に別な地域においては上がっているということなんでしょうか。もう少し傾向というかパターンをご説明いただけないでしょうか。少なくても今起こっていることが読者がもう少し感触として分かりやすいように説明していただけないでしょうか。
毎日やってるもんですからちょっと、ついついトピックを言っちゃいましたけど、傾向としてはですね、私 お配りしましたこのページのですね、6ページを見ていただきますと、グラフがあります。これは日々のですね、事故起こってから以降のですね、福島第一原発の20キロよりも以上、胃炎におけるモニタリングポストの空間線量率の値の時系列変化があります。
Since I am giving this presentation every day, I tended to just pick up the main topics. But as a trend, as you can see on page 6 of the document that we have distributed to you, there is a graph on page 6 which shows the spatial radiation dose rate trend in the various monitoring posts, 20 kilometers and beyond from Fukushima #1 nuclear power plant. Measurements have, and the graph shows measurements that have been taken every day since the incident has occurred.
ご覧いただきますと、17日からずっと3月の17日からずっと4月の6日までのグラフになっていますけど、ご覧のようにずっと下がり続けています。若干波はありますけど、ずっと下がり続けています。
And this graph on page 6 shows the measurements from the 17th of March to the 6th of April. And as you can see, the graph is declining continuously, although there are some ups and downs here, some slight ups and downs.
それぞれ番号が打った1番からずっと打ってますけど、その番号は次の8ページにあります。失礼、ごめんなさい、前ですか。7ページ。7ページ。あれ何ページですか。ごめんなさい、ちょっと、番号がちょっとあれですけど、これですね、空間線量率です。確か8ページに図にありますような、に一部番号を打ってますけど、こういう番号に符合したようなところの空間線量率がずっと下がっているということです。
右側の番号ですね。右側の番号ですね。右側のずっと番号ですね。And on the graph on page 6 on the right-hand side, you can see numbers, which shows the different curve lines. And these numbers correspond to the various monitoring locations shown on page 8.
これが一つの例でありまして、もう一つの例は海のモニタリングっていうのがありまして、これが9ページですね。9ページから始まります。
Another example is the sea area monitoring, which starts from page 9 in the material distributed to you.
それの日にちの傾向でありますが、これは13ページ、それから14ページにあります。
And the trends from day to day is shown on page 13 and page 14.
大体のポイントにおいては下がっているんですが、一部は、例えば5というナンバーのところは、4月の1日から、5日までのところで上がっているものもあります。
And as you can see from those graphs, for most monitoring points, the numbers are declining. There are some exceptions, however. For instance, number 5 shows a increase from the 1st of April to the 5th of April.
だいたいちょっと一例だけで恐縮ですが、そういう感じでございます。
So this is only one example, but that is the general feel.
Okay, go ahead.
Excuse me, Brian Walker from CNN. If I could direct this to Mr. Nishiyama or whoever else can answer. We've seen today the mega float that has begun to come in. That's certainly part of a solution. But I was wondering if people can address a little bit about some of the other machinery that will be coming in. UAVs, robots, also whether or not there's been any outreach to the Russians that we understand about a waste processing, floating waste processing service boat as well.
CNN ですけれども、西山さんおよびその他お答えいただける方に伺いたいんですけれども、本日メガフロートが入港してきて、これは解決策の一部になると思うんですけれども、少しその他にどういった機材類が今後入ってくるのか、使われるようになるのか、少し言及していただけますでしょうか。例えば UAV とかロボットとかなどで、そしてあともう一つ、その浮遊している廃棄物、これ廃棄物の処理、フローティングの廃棄物の処理、これはあれでしょう。フローティングの廃棄物の処理っていうのは何かこう海上になんか浮かべて処理するんでしょうか。あるいは海上のボートを使うとの廃棄物処理でロシアに協力を求めたということはあるのでしょうか。
まずメガフロートのことは今のたくさんある水の処理に使われるわけです。それでそのカテゴリーの他のものとしては、まず、多くのタンクを発注しているということと、それからその他にはバージ船という船を使うことが、基本的に考えられています。
Regarding the mega float, we are thinking of using the mega float for disposing of the large amount of water that we need to take care of. And besides the mega float, we have placed orders already for a large number of tanks, and also we intend to use barge vessels as well.
それからUAV というのは what is UAV?
Remote helicopters and aerial monitoring.
遠隔操作のヘリコプターとか、あるいは航空モニタリングなどです。空からのモニタリングです。
それであればその UAV とかそれから、人間が近づけないところに行けるようなロボットとかそういうものは今その活用することが検討されています。いろいろな国からそういう協力の申し出があります。
In that case, we are now looking into the possibility of using UAVs as well as using robots to work in places that human beings cannot get near. And we do have offers for cooperation from various different countries.
それからロシアのその放射性廃棄物の処理をする船的なものですけれども、これは日本がロシアに協力してロシアにまず、差し上げたもので、これが日本の今回の事故のために使えるかどうかについては今日本側で検討しております。
And also regarding the vessel or boat for processing of radioactive waste that Russia has, this is something that Japan provided to Russia in the past as part of our cooperation to Russia. And Japan is now studying whether or not we can use these vessels for the incident that we are now facing.
Peter?
Peter Guyot, German Radio ARD. One general question regarding the simulations, for example, with Speedy Computer. There are many kind of simulations going on, but there was just once shown the results to the public. Why didn't you share this more often to the public? There's also simulation going on regarding the streams in the ocean where the radioactive substances are going. Actually, so this would be also something what you can share with the public, I assume. And just one short question to Nishiyama-san. When you have to do a risk assessment at the moment, where do you see the biggest risk at the reactors in Fukushima Daiichi?
南ドイツ新聞ですけれども、ごめんなさい、南ドイツラジオですけれども、シミュレーションに関する一般的な質問なんですけれども、例えば非常に超高速コンピューターを使ったいろいろなシミュレーションなどに関して、その結果が一部公表されたんですけれども、なぜもっと頻繁にこういったシミュレーションの結果が公表されないんでしょうか。それと例えば海の中で海流に乗って放射能物質がどういう方向にどのようにして流れているのかに関するシミュレーションも、これも公表できるデータの一つなんじゃないかと思います。それと西山さんにお伺いしたいんですけれども、リスク評価として福島第一原発の原子炉の中で、どれがというかどこに最大のリスクがあるとお思いでしょうか。
まずシミュレーションなんかですでにやられたものについてはできるだけシェアした方がいいと思いますけれども、シミュレーションを活用するニーズが一番高いのはこの事故の初期段階で必ずしもデータのない時期に一番活用できるような感じはしております。
Regarding simulations that have already been done, we are trying to share the results of the simulation as much as possible. And actually, there is the greatest need for simulation usually at the initial stages, right after the incident has occurred.
私の方からもう一つお答えしておいて、それから安全委員会の方にご発言をお願いしたいと思いますが、一番大きなリスクと考えますと、まずこのやっぱり水をどういうふうにうまく処理しながら、まず冷やす役割を果たす水をどううまく処理をしていくかというところが一番難しいものと思っております。
And let me just answer one more point and then have the representative from the Nuclear Safety Commission respond to this question. Regarding the risk, the greatest risk, I would say, is the difficulty in how to dispose of the water that is playing the role of cooling the reactor.
今放射能の拡散の予測をするシステムとしてスピーディーというものがございます。
Right now, we have a system called SPEEDY, which can predict the proliferation of radioactivity.
これはこのシステムの説明をしますと、原子力発電所からどういう物質がどういう濃度でいつ放出されたかという放出源の情報、これをもとにその後の気象予測ですとか地形のデータを加えて、それぞれのエリアでどれぐらいの線量が予測されるかというものを計算するものです。
And if I may briefly explain this system called the SPEEDY, the SPEEDY uses information regarding what kind of material is released from the nuclear power plant in what kind of concentration. And it adds, furthermore, the climatic predictions and also topography data in order to arrive at a prediction of what kind of concentration may be expected in different areas.
ところが今回の事故の場合はその放出源の情報が実は得られていないんですね。これは例えばサイトが停電してしまったとかいろいろな理由がありますけれども、その放出源の情報がないために正確な予測をすることができないという状態に陥っています。
But in the case of the incident that we are now facing, we do not have access to the information regarding the source of the release of radioactivity for various different reasons, such as power blackout on the site and so forth. But we have a situation now where we cannot make an accurate prediction.
そこで今このシステムを使って放出源の情報がなくてもその観測されたデータから逆算をしてその放出源情報を入力できないかというための、試算ですね、こういうことを行っております。
And so what we are doing now is we are doing some trial calculations to try and see whether we can input the data regarding the source of the release of radioactivity by calculating backwards from the monitoring data that we have so that we can use the system even without the information regarding the source of the radiation.
したがってその作業が進んでよりその精度が上がってきたらそのスピーディーのデータをですね公開することも考えていきたいというふうに今考えて作業を進めているところです。
And so we are now working on this system with the intention in mind of making public the data that we obtain from SPEEDY once this work that we are doing moves forward and we are able to gain more accurate data.
When do you think it will come out? When do you think you can propose this data to the public? Sorry.
そうしますとそれいつ頃になりそうでしょうか。公表できるようになるのはいつ頃になりそうでしょうか。
今一生懸命やっておりますが、この場でいつというふうにお答えできるだけの確かな情報は今ございません。
We are really working hard on this right now, but I do not have any information for sure that would enable me to tell you at this moment when we will be able to release the data.
Okay.
Thank you. This is a question for Nakayama-san of the Fisheries Agency. Thank you very much for your explanation. I appreciate that the cesium is not stored but is excreted from the fish. What happens if one of these smaller fish is eaten by a larger fish before it excretes that cesium? But the cesium, of course, is still in its body. It's now ingested by larger fish that swim away. They, of course, travel far from the area of Ibaraki and Fukushima. What happens then?
水産庁の中山さんに質問ですけれども、先ほどはご説明ありがとうございました。で、先ほどのご説明では、セシウムは魚の体内に蓄積するのではなく排泄されるという説明でしたけれども、小さい魚がそのセシウムを排泄する前に大きな魚に食べられてしまった場合はどうなるのでしょうか。要するにセシウムがまだ体の中から排泄されていない段階で大きな魚に取り込まれてしまった場合に、大きな魚は茨城福島の近海だけではなくて相当遠くまで泳いでいくと思うんですけれども、そういう場合はどうなるんでしょうか。
先ほどお見せしましたように、そのフードチェーンで食物連鎖の中でその濃度が増していくということはないと
いうことが分かっているわけです。でそれは、餌由来の場合でも同様でありまして、その消化管に入って細胞に入ったものもこれも排泄されていくということですので、大きな魚が食べてもそれは大きな魚が排泄していくということで、この図のようにどんどん減っていく、要するに環境水と同じぐらいの条件にだんだん近づいていくということが知られております。
As I have shown you earlier, through the graph that I have showed you, it is known that concentrations do not increase in the food chain. And the same is true when the radiation is derived from what the fish eat. When whatever they eat go through their digestive tract, and even if it is taken into their cell, the same thing occurs. In other words, even if the small fish is eaten by the big fish, it will be just excreted by the big fish after the big fish eats the small fish. And it is known that eventually the levels would become closer and closer to the levels in the environmental water.
Dennis Normile of Science Magazine. I guess this question would be for Mr. Nishiyama or for Mr. Shinano. Now you have an evacuation zone of radius of 20 kilometers. Once the crisis is resolved, will people be able to move back in to that evacuation zone, or will there be some continuing zone of exclusion, which might be too dangerous to be inhabited for some time into the future?
サイエンスマガジンのものですけれども、この質問は西山さんもしくは信濃さんにお尋ねしますけれども、現在避難地域は半径20キロとなっておりますけれども、この危機が一旦収束した場合には住民は市民はその現在避難地域となっている地域にまた再び戻ることができるんでしょうか。それとも将来相当な期間にわたって足を踏み入れるのには危険すぎるというその市民が踏み入れられない地域というのはある程度の期間残ることになるんでしょうか。
モニタリングをしながら実際のその数値を見て、その結果で解除できるかどうかを判断するということになると思います。発電所の状況を落ち着かせて、その上でそういう判断をして、どこまでお借りいただけるかということを決めていくということになると思います。
I believe we will have to monitor the levels and see the actual levels at that time to determine whether or not we can lift the evacuation zone. So after the crisis at the nuclear power station settles down, we will have to determine based on the levels at that time, how much we can actually have the residents return to this area.
Horst Kleuser, German Radio. I have two questions actually. The first one deals with the workers. Can you give us little figures on how many workers are actually working on Fukushima and the surroundings, in which shift is? What type of workers are there? Are there like unskilled or technicians or engineers? And do you by now have any data on how their personal radiation levels are? Because we understood that in the beginning there were not enough dosimeters for all those guys working there. And second questions, the only radionuclides you mentioned were cesium and iodine. Aren't there any others which have been found, like strontium or plutonium, any radionuclides in the surroundings?
南ドイツラジオですけれども、2つ質問があります。最初は作業員に関する質問ですけれども、今まで福島原発およびその周辺で働いている作業員が何人いるか、その数は報告いただいて説明いただいているんですけれども、どういう種類の作業員なのでしょうか。非熟練工なのか、それとも技術者なのか、エンジニアなのか、どういう種類の作業員なんでしょうか。それと個々の作業員の放射能レベルのデータはあるんでしょうか。私の理解では当初十分な線量計が行き渡っていなかったということも聞いておりますけれども、それぞれの個々人の労働者のあるいは作業員の放射能レベルに関するデータはあるんでしょうか。これが一つ第一の質問。2つ目の質問は、今まで発表されている各種はセシウムとヨウ素しかないんですけれども、その他の各種はないんでしょうか。例えばストロンチウムとかプルトニウムなどの各種はないのでしょうか。
まず発電所の中に今現在働いておられる方々のカテゴリーとしては、東京電力の方と、それから東京電力の関連の電気工事などをやる会社とか、それから東芝とか日立とかそういうメーカーの方、それから建設会社でいろいろ建物について修理をしたり、あるいは今回の地面に穴を掘ったりとか、そういう建設会社の方、大体こんな関係の方がいらっしゃると思います。
First of all, regarding the categories of people who are working in the Fukushima nuclear power plant would consist of, for instance, employees of TEPCO, Tokyo Electric Power Company, also subcontractors of workers from subcontractors of TEPCO who will be involved in the electricity work, and also members from the manufacturing companies such as Toshiba, Hitachi, and also workers from the construction companies who will be involved in repairing the building or digging the hole in the ground. So that would be roughly the breakdown of the types of workers that are working in the power plant.
それから忘れてはいけないのは自衛隊の方々がかなりの数いらっしゃるのと、それからその前の水を放水していただいた頃には消防関係の方もいらっしゃいました。
And also other members we should not forget are the considerable number of self-defense force personnel. And also, in the beginning, when we were spraying water, a large number of people from the fire department was also involved.
それから放射線の管理については一時そのカウンターが足りなかった時がありましたけれども、その機械は今は全員が一人一つずつ持っていて、それでこれ250ミリシーベルトでしたっけ？年間の線量が250ミリシーベルトになるところまで、きちんと管理をしながら働いています。
And regarding the management of radioactive levels, at one time we had a short period of time when we did not have enough dosimeters. But now we have one dosimeter each for each worker. And the level of radioactivity or the dose of radioactivity is being properly managed. And the workers are working within the limit where their level of radioactivity reaches 250 millisieverts per year.
最後に他の各種がどういうものがあるかということについては例えば、プルトニウムは検出されていますけれども、これについては現時点では大気中にある核実験を原因とするフォールアウトと同じ水準なので人体には影響がないものと思っています。
And also in response to your second question regarding what other nuclides have been found. For instance, plutonium has been detected, but the levels of plutonium that has been detected at the current moment is about the same as the level of plutonium that was found in the atmosphere when atomic testing was done in the past, and we consider that there is no effect on the human body.
そのことはメティの文書の 1ページ目の一番下のパラグラフに書いてあります。
And if you can please refer to the news release by METI, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, the point that I have just mentioned is written on the very bottom paragraph on page 1.
How many workers? How many workers?
作業員は何人なんでしょうか。
だいたい300人から500人ぐらいの感じだと思います。
I believe the workers working will be roughly in the order of 300 to 500 people.
My name is Inamura from Grandma International, Cuba. In 2004, we journalists organized in Japan, I'm acting as Secretary General for the club, visited Cuba. And in Havana city, we are invited by government to see Tarara Rehabilitation Center. In this Tarara Rehabilitation Center, they are now taking care of 10,000 nuclear higaisha at Chernobyl. And I took a lot of photos of them. And now I'm introducing them in my daily news. But I'm now hesitated to show it to mass media because of all of photo is too much ugly girl and ladies.
Could you ask
and so my question is, you know this Tarara area, and also you have idea to send to see 被害者を見に行くような企画ありますか？ My question is.
私はグランマーインターナショナルキューバの稲村ですけれども、2004年に私が事務局長をしている日本におけるジャーナリストが組織したグループがキューバに行きまして、ハバナ市で政府から招待されてタララ再建、復興センターというのを見てまいりました。でこのタララリハビリテーションセンターというのはチェルノブイリにおける原発被害者、原子力被害者1万人を世話しているところなんですけれども、で実際に行った時に数多くの写真を撮って、新聞などに紹介してきたんですけれども、マスコミにこれを流すのはちょっと躊躇を覚えます。というのは少女とか女性の写真たくさんあるんですけども、相当見にくいといいますかものもありますので、ですが質問としてはこのタララ地域というのをご存知かどうか、それとこのタララ地域に行って原発の被害者 を実際に自分の目で見に行く、実際に見に行くというか会いに行く、企画などはあるのでしょうか。
Who are you asking your question to? 誰にご質問されてますか？To me, okay. I have received your email, so I know what you're talking about. I know I have seen your photos, and but at this juncture, I don't have any plan to go there. I think we have obligations to tackle the situation, evolving situations in Japan, and that's I think is utmost priority to address issues in this country. Andrew.
Can't get this microphone out. Mr. Nishiyama, I just was wondering, what is your response to the statement made by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that the very high levels of radiation in the dry well of Unit 2 suggest that some of the core has leaked out of the reactor pressure vessel, which would seem to make perhaps the situation more serious than we thought.
西山さんにお伺いしますけれども、NRC の、言っていることに対する反応を伺いたいと思います。NRC は第2号機のドライウェルにおいて非常に高い放射能レベルが検知されているということは、圧力容器の中に炉心の一部が漏れ出ていることを示すものであって、実際に考えられているよりも事態は深刻ではないかと思うんですけれども、こういう NRC の発表に関してどのようなご反応でしょうか。
NRC の方々とは我々毎日のように意見交換をし情報を共有しています。で今おっしゃった NRC の見解というのは現時点のものではないと我々は思ってますけれども、我々としては2号機には例えばサプレッションチェンバーでの爆発音がしたりするという問題があるし、その他にも原子炉にもリークがあるというふうには思いますけれども、今おっしゃったようなところについては我々はまだ認識しておりません。
We are having an exchange of views with the NRC every day, and we are sharing information. And the statement by the NRC, the statement by the NRC that you have quoted, I believe, is not a statement that was made at the present stage. Regarding unit number 2, for instance, we did hear some kind of noise like an explosion in the suppression chamber, and even besides that, we consider that there is probably some kind of leakage from the reactor as well. But I do not consider that we have a situation as you have described it earlier.
Very last question.
Yes, if I could just ask one final question from CNN. When I was speaking earlier about the machinery, I think maybe I was trying to get more at what do you have a wish list of things that could really help turn the tide? What do you need most? Do you need more people? Do you need more equipment? Or do you also, as some of the experts we've spoken to, do you need more expertise from other countries and from other people outside of Japan and in other industries? What could help you the most right now?
CNN から最後に一つ伺いたいんですけれども、先ほどいろいろな機械類とか機材とか伺ったときに私がどちらかというと伺いたかったのは、今の時点で全体の流れを変えるのに役に立つ今最も欲しいと 思っているものは何かということを本当は聞きたかったんです。例えば人材なのか、それとも機械類なのか、それとも一部の専門家、私が話をした一部の専門家が言っているように、他の国の専門知識、日本以外あるいは他の産業の専門知識が欲しいと思っているのか、すなわち現時点で最も役に立つもので欲しいと思っているものは何なんでしょうか。
今の機械でありますとか技術とかそれぞれNRC やフランスのアレバとかそういうようなところのご協力を得て、かなり密接に連携していますので随分とそういう点ではサポートを得ています。で今そういう中で一番さっき申し上げたそのリスクとの関係でいくとこの水をどうやって処理して冷やしながらその水をどうやって処理していくかというそれで冷却のシステムを作っていくというこの部分についてどういう形でもいいのでサポートがあるということが今喫緊の課題ではないかと思います。
Regarding equipment, technology, and others, we are working closely together in cooperation with NRC and Areba from France. So we already have quite a deal of support from these outside countries and organizations. And in relation to the risk that I mentioned earlier, I think the most urgent issue now is support in whatever form possible with regard to how we can dispose the water while cooling and be able to build a sustainable cooling system.
This concludes today's briefing, and we will have another round of briefing of this kind tomorrow evening again. Thank you very much for coming.